This is the Women of Wonder podcast, where we help women tap into their superpowers. Welcome to the Women of Wonder podcast. Carly and I are so excited to have Sonia Sunger with us, a newscaster, this extraordinary woman. Welcome, Sonia.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here and excited to see where this conversation takes us.
We're going to wing it. We're going to be casual. We're going to be conversational. And we're just going to talk about whatever's on our mind. And so maybe, Sonia, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, what brings you joy, where you're at right now.
Well, I'd say first and foremost, I'm a mom because I feel like that's my most important job. It's the most real job I have. I have two beautiful children. I'm married to the love of my life. We recently moved to the burbs and we're kind of building our suburban life.
Wow.
And you know what? I'm loving it.
You're loving it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I used to be a downtown girl before, but I just enjoy the simplicity and the quiet moments that we have now as a family.
Amazing.
As opposed to, you know, the busy, loud life that I used to lead downtown before. So it was a bit of a shift for sure, but I'm loving that. So that's more my personal life. And then most people would know me from my broadcasting career as a journalist. I've been in the industry for nearly 2 decades now.
Amazing,
thank you.
impressive.
And I've been at Global BC for just over 10 years. And most of that time I've been a host on Global News Morning. So that means I wake up extra early. I was just telling Carly that I get up at 3:30.
3:30
And I'm at
a.m.
work at 4:30. So you can imagine what that's like having 2 young children. So there's a lot of wake-ups in the night. There's a lot of tired moments the following morning. But once I get to work and I get going, I kind of forget about it. I kind of forget about how tired I am.
Wow, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
It shows that you're in the right industry.
Yeah, you know what? I really feel grateful because I love what I do. I literally get paid to talk for a living. And now I'm here doing more of it.
They're like, come and talk some more and tell us everything. Tell us your stories.
Yeah.
Tell us everything.
What do you want to know? I'm an open book.
Oh, I like it.
I mean, we had the chance to interview you for season 1, which we got a good amount of detail in your history and how you got to exactly where you are today. But I feel like today we would just want to keep going a little bit deeper. So I'm curious, you know, what is it that after the workday, after you get out of the office, what are the things that are exciting you these days or inspiring you?
Well, the honest answer is sometimes I just need a break and need to watch some reality TV when I get home.
Any favorites?
I like Below Deck. I also like crime series, like dramas. There's nothing in particular that I'm watching right now, but sometimes I just need that moment of just me time, uninterrupted. And my husband kind of knows this. He works from home, so when I come home, I'll usually give him a quick hello. The kids are still at daycare, and then it's my time for myself. And I take usually about an hour just to do whatever I want to do. Some days that means, you know, I need to get that load of laundry done. And I know that doesn't sound like something enjoyable, but, you know, I'll pop in a podcast. I'll listen to a podcast and I'll do some laundry or do some cleaning or whatever project is around the house. But I find, I guess, it's just alone time is what I need. Especially after spending so much of my time and energy throughout the day with others and speaking. I just need that quiet time for myself. So it looks different on different days depending on what I need. Sometimes it could just be sitting on the patio and looking out at the mountains and just enjoying the view. And that's it.
Right. So just like that time to decompress, to kind of go inward, whether that be, you know, sometimes it's great, like we zone out in television, but sometimes it's also nice to just like look out at the mountains or breathe.
And ground yourself.
Ground yourself.
Take my shoes off and put my feet on the grass, you know, and just reconnect with the earth. I mean, I find there's nothing that'll kind of put things into perspective the way that nature does. So I really like that. And, you know, going for walks with the kids, that's another one. But I would say just alone time. Like I've realized that about myself. I need that time alone. And if I have a really busy week, like I recently had like a week full of family events for a wedding, and I was totally drained. And I think a lot of it is just that every moment of my day was taken up. I didn't have any time for myself. Even taking a shower was difficult.
Yeah.
So just getting back to my normal routine, having a little bit of time for myself, it just helps me feel at peace.
It's interesting that we give, as women, I think there's lots of energy that we put out, and especially if we're like out in public and there's events and like it's a wedding, Indian weddings especially, like it is a week long of give everything you've got and like look good while you're doing it and show up and energized and dancing and talking. And so I think as women sometimes to remind ourselves, okay, slow down, put your feet in the grass, take a moment to breathe, and that not only is it okay, but it's actually necessary. Like if we don't do that, what are we doing?
Well, you're depleted, and then how are you going to show up for your loved ones or those around you? You know, you need to do that self-care. It is so important. And as I'm saying that, I'm like, I need to do more of it in maybe more meaningful self-care, not just putting on the TV, because like you said, it is a little bit mindless, right?
But it feels good too. Like we need that.
It does.
We need that.
It does.
The
I'm like,
brain.
I'd be lying if I say I get home and I meditate. I try to at night, but I don't know. I don't like to meditate in the middle of my day. Maybe everyone has their own
Timing.
own routine that works for them, but yeah, that's kind of what works for me.
Amazing. And so we were talking about how there's even moments where, you know, as a woman, it's important to advocate for yourself in this system. And that sometimes the system isn't always set up for women, like we're talking about self-care and look out for themselves, to like encourage that or like support that. And so maybe you can talk a bit about your experience and like why it is important that we as women, you know, advocate for ourselves in the medical system or the health system.
Yeah, I mean, I think for decades, for centuries, millennia, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I think that, you know, we as women are traditionally the caregivers, and we are the last ones to take time out for ourselves. It's just naturally the way things have gone. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but it is. And I think that if you don't take care of yourself, if you're not fully happy and functioning, how are you going to show up for your family? Are you going to show up being miserable?
Yeah.
Or are you going to show up with your cup full
Yeah.
and overflowing and ready to give it to everyone around you? And I really thought about that a lot when, especially after having children, and just with something as simple as sleep. I didn't sleep, you know, for the first like 5-6 months after having my son, and I decided to sleep train. And that it's a controversial topic for a lot of moms, but for me, I knew it was the right thing, because I was like, I need to sleep, because if I sleep, I will feel human, and if I feel human, I can be a better mom for my son.
Yeah.
And if he sleeps, he's going to feel better too. And you know what? It was the right decision for me, but it's just a small example of, you know, going through that process for my own self-care. Yes, for my entire family, really. But I think it kind of points to that larger theme of, you know, it's like going into an airplane and putting on your oxygen mask before you care for others. You need to do that. You need to be whole and full to be able to help anyone around you.
Yeah. It's a big part of Women of Wonder. Like, why we even do this? Like, why do we do this? It's because we believe if we can put ourselves first and care about ourselves, then we can rise up, then we can be great at everything we do. And if we're not, then we're depleted, and then we're not the best. And then no one gets to be the best because they're not getting the energy from us. And I think women really are this like central part of the community.
Yeah. But you know what? I have to be honest at the same time and say, I also struggle with a lot of guilt, like mom guilt for taking time out for myself. And, you know, like just over the weekend, I had, you know, a celebration for my cousin who's getting married. And, you know, it ended up being half my day, and I'm leaving the kids and they're crying and they're screaming. And I just felt awful knowing that they're going to be miserable. And so for the first couple hours of the event, I couldn't even enjoy it until my husband sent me some videos of the kids and they were happy. And I was like, okay, now everything's fine. And maybe with time that will go away, but that's definitely something I struggle with.
Mom guilt is so real.
Yeah.
I think I don't know how many times I say to Carly, like, oh, I feel so bad. Oh, my poor kids. Oh, I'm like, and then she reminds me, like, no, this is actually good because you're taking care of yourself. And then when you come back, and then I remind myself, I'm going to come back to the kids and I'm going to be even better and like happy and sparkly, but it's hard.
It's so biological too. Like I know there's so much of it that's innate, and then there's also so much of it that comes from our culture and the shame that we put on people for making those types of decisions.
Yes.
So it's like, how do we also release that shame?
I turned to my husband one day and I said, do you ever have dad guilt?
Oh my gosh, I've never even heard dad guilt. This is hilarious.
And he looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. And
why would I have
and then
guilt?
I literally had to explain what it meant, like from a female perspective. And he was like, no, I never feel that way. And I was like, all right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Good talk.
Interesting. Good talk. Good to know. Good to know.
Maybe it's a biological thing. I don't know. Maybe there's someone that's a little bit more educated on this field that could give us a little bit more perspective.
Yes,
but
let's hear about it.
It certainly is, I think, a struggle for everyone. But I think just going back to that, fill your own cup.
Interesting. Even when you are giving and delivering the news, how does that, like being full or depleted, how does that affect or impact your work?
Big time. I mean, if I haven't slept, if I'm tired, if, you can imagine if you're running on fumes, you're probably going to notice that, right? Yeah. So I do my best to get as much sleep as I can, to rest in my downtime. But then there's also another part of me that's like, if there's breaking news and adrenaline just kicks in and I'm on a different level, then it's like my mind, my body goes into like muscle memory mode and I'm there. So I love the thrill of it as well. So that keeps me going. But yeah, if you don't have that downtime to recharge, how are you going to show up fully?
And you're seen as a leader in our community, and you've like reached this level in your career, and you're out in the community and you're hosting all these events, and people are looking to you as a leader.
Yeah, and I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all together. I'm struggling just like everybody else, and I think that, sometimes people ask me, they're like, well, how do you juggle it all? I'm like, exactly that. I juggle. And, sometimes something's gonna give. And sometimes that means I'm not going to sleep as much. Sometimes that means I'm not going to eat as well as I would have liked to. Sometimes it means I'm not going to get that workout in. I think that's just the time that I'm living in right now with young children and with a really demanding career. But I still enjoy it. Yeah. Maybe I thrive a little bit on just being busy. We've talked before about human design, and I'm a generator. So I'm constantly go, go, go. I like to be doing things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So knowing that you're in this chapter of life, but you've also been in this career now for almost 2 decades, I'm curious, like the shifts that you've seen within the space, and like what are you hoping that you can also contribute into this next phase of the news?
Thanks for asking that. I've actually been working pretty hard behind the scenes to reach out to and to try and inspire this next generation to think about a career in journalism. And the reason why is, our patterns have completely shifted in terms of the way that we consume media. Growing up, I used to watch the news with my parents. That was how we got our information. Now, what are we doing? We're all on our phones, right? So the appetite for news, I believe, is still there. It's just how we deliver it. And I think that we're going through a bit of a shift right now in what that's going to look like, maybe more on-demand viewing, not necessarily, prime time 6 o'clock viewing. And it's a 24-hour news cycle, so people are constantly looking for updates. And I think that, in the past few years, I noticed it in particular after 2016, after the that American presidential election where Donald Trump was elected, there was a complete attack on the media from, you've heard the term fake news and all of that. And it really shook people's trust in journalists because there were so many varying opinions and news coming from sources that I wouldn't necessarily say were trusted. And I think that just brought all media into question. And it is infuriating to me because I've been in this industry for a long time. Not once have I ever been told I need to report on a story a certain way. Never once have I been in an editorial meeting and talked about a strategy. That's just not the way we operate, at least. And I've worked for two of the biggest networks in Canada. The way that it goes down is, what's the story? What's the information? What's the truth? What's the truth here? How do we get that to our audience? What voices can we find to share that? And that's really what happens behind the scenes. It's not this big plan with puppets and strings. And it just, so when you're on the inside and you hear people on the outside talking about this, like, almost this conspiracy, it really, it hurts.
Wow.
And I've even had that conversation with people close to me that have, questioned the media and our goals. And it's like, the goal is to share information and to be storytellers and to be positive change makers in our society, to hold people in places of authority to account, to make sure that, the promises that were made to our communities are being kept. That's essentially what it is. And really, it's the pillar of democracy. Without a strong media, without a robust journalism sector, how does society operate? How do we make sure that there are checks and balances? If there is no global news, if there is no CBC news, whatever, it doesn't even matter the name of the network. But if those traditional platforms don't exist, who are you going to trust for your information? That's the question to ask. And I think that, maybe this will be watched by some people that have thought about a career in journalism. Maybe you just really like to ask questions. Maybe you like to talk to people. Maybe you like telling stories. We need more people to be telling these stories. And it's sad because our industry is shrinking right now.
Yes.
And now more than ever is when journalism matters.
So, for example, in the news, you're sharing what, the news is and what's of topic right at that moment. We want to give you an opportunity to share, who do you feel needs a voice right now? Who do you feel needs a voice that, you would like to give voice to? And, those stories should be told.
Well, one topic, and it's something that we've discussed before, just women's health topics is something that I don't think gets enough attention. So I did an interview a couple of years ago just about the way that medical research has been done for decades. And most of that research has focused around male bodies and, the results on male test groups, and then using that information to assume that the same would be true for a woman's body, when in fact we're learning now that things like heart disease show up very differently in women than they do in men. Things like Alzheimer's disproportionately affect women than they do men. Why? We still don't know. Why? Because no one's bothered to ask until recently. Right. The topic of, I think, medical gaslighting, that really needs to be discussed, because I don't know how many women in my life I've spoken to that haven't received the care that they required because their medical provider just assumed it was an emotional issue or a hormonal issue or a women's issue, and not being heard fully and not being I don't know, I think that just like any profession, there's biases, unfortunately. And I just think that there's a lot of work to be done to make sure that medical professionals are fully hearing a patient's symptoms and story before coming to a conclusion. I think a lot of times the conclusion is drawn before they're even finished talking about what their issue is. And, I have had discussions with women that didn't get diagnosed in a timely manner because their doctor told them, nope, you don't have this, you don't have this. But, their symptoms were consistent with whatever that illness was. And sure enough, they had it. So I think that we need to be a little bit more courageous when advocating for ourselves. We do have to advocate for ourselves, especially in the Canadian medical system, because there's no handbook that comes along with it. You really do have to do your own research, ask around. And if you're not sure, ask questions. If you need a second opinion, get second opinions. Like you control your body and your life, and you don't get a second one. So don't be afraid to ask the questions.
Yes, and as women, I think we're often, it's Canadian women especially, like, okay, sure, that's what you said. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to take that as, like, that's the answer. I'm not going to, say, like, but what about this? What about that? I think it's important that we tap into our intuition. Like, if something doesn't feel right, we're probably right. Something's probably not right. And so go with our gut. And I like what you said, get other opinions. Yeah. It's not that you're offending someone by saying, like, I'm just going to talk to someone else and see what they think too. Like, let's get the whole picture.
And even if they are offended.
Right.
Yeah. Who cares?
Who cares?
Who cares? Because you know what? You're offending me by not listening.
Yeah. Yes.
Not listening to what I'm trying to tell you. So
Did you hear what I said?
Exactly.
I'm saying I'm in pain, or I'm saying I'm suffering.
Yeah, it's like, that they're under these time pressures. That they're trying to see 100 patients in a day. Like, there's so much there too, to, the experience that these doctors are having. And, in the US, everything is so siloed. There's no one to look at you holistically. Like, you have one thing and they'll look at it from the angle of, okay, I am this doctor. I look at this part of your body. And then, but there's all these things that are clearly, cross-pollinating within you.
Yeah, interconnected.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much at play there. And I think for us, like, even the research, can be this slippery slope of, okay, well, this could be 100 possible things. Like, where do I start? And I feel like I see that as a huge opportunity in this next, 100 years in the medical system. Like, what are we doing to really help people advocate for themselves, but even to know where to start for a lot of things? Like, you go to your GP and, their experience is limited on these very, like, specialty type of situations. So it's like, what else? What else is there that we can do for ourselves?
Yes.
And yes, listen to ourselves, but I don't know.
And, like, have our doctors talking to our naturopaths, talking to our specialists, that would be amazing. Let's create a new system.
Amazing.
Let's create a new system where they all
Why can't we collaborate?
Why can't we collaborate?
And a naturopath's opinion doesn't have to oppose a GP's, and, vice versa. And, I recently saw my own naturopath, and, I hadn't seen her since for a number of years. And, she asked me a bunch of questions like, okay, so you've had 2 kids, like, have you gotten this checked out? How are your hormones? How are your iron levels? I'm like, I don't know.
Wow.
I'm like, no one asked me.
I don't even think to check this.
And she just made a really good point about the fact that our medical system needs to change. When you give birth, your body goes through a complete overhaul. And you're depleted, nutritionally. Like, you've created a life.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why in our medical system we don't say, okay, let's check you out.
Yes.
How is everything?
Yeah.
How are you looking? How is your iron? I've traditionally always had low iron, so I'm sure it's probably low again. I still need to go for that blood test. I haven't done it yet.
We're going to follow up with you. We're going to follow up. Accountability between people, right?
But, it took that naturopath's perspective for me to even think about that.
Wow.
And, she's coming from the perspective of a woman who believes in holistic medicine. And, she doesn't not believe in traditional medicine. Right. She does, but I think they can be complementary.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, even like women's health tech, it like they're now starting to pick up interest, like VC dollars and people wanting to invest. But the feedback from a lot of VCs are that it's not a big enough niche. So there's something for, pregnant soon-to-be mothers or like women in general. And you're like, I'm pretty sure it's half the population. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
There's not enough interest.
It's
Interesting.
like even like the different industries that support women's health. And, the US naturopath is not a big thing, but you go to an acupuncturist and they ask you the same types of questions. So I feel like that's also what's pushing people to want to go and explore these different types of medicine.
Yeah.
Because they feel someone is asking more than, okay, it hurts there, like let's treat.
Yeah,
pain.
and I believe in science. I believe in
Yeah.
all of that. I'm not knocking traditional medicine, but I think that there is some wisdom in some of those other philosophies, whether it's Ayurvedic medicine or whether it is naturopathic or Chinese medicine. I mean, there are so many answers that people have been, or remedies rather, that people have been using for centuries that seem to work pretty well.
Pretty well. And how did it feel for you that someone asked you, like, how
I just
are
felt
you?
seen. I
Yeah.
felt cared for.
My goodness.
I felt like she was being proactive.
Wow.
Whereas you go to see a GP and it's like, all right, what are you here for? Okay.
Specific.
Anything else? All right. See you later. That's how it goes. Yeah. And I understand. Doctors have a lot of pressure. They have a lot of patients to see. So I understand it. But I think that in a perfect world, we could make so many wonderful and beautiful improvements to our medical system.
Yeah, and even having like a yearly checklist of things to like maybe be on and think about, even as women, like, oh, I should get this checked. What about that? What? And like having people who are going to ask us those questions, and that we are kind of all even responsible for each other, and that we say to each other, like, hey, how's your iron levels lately?
Yeah, I know. Or even, when was your last pap test?
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Oh, yes. And a lot of information. I just got a call from a walk-in clinic saying like, hey, your pap test is due. And I was like, oh, right. Like, I can't believe last time I did it was at some random walk-in clinic because that's all there was. But then I was like, oh, I actually did just get it done. Oh, so the walk-in clinic isn't in correspondence with like the bigger system to know, like the medical system is not saying like, okay, Nisha, check, done. Like there's not.
Yeah, there's not a central
central system,
like a agency or a network that everyone can log into. And I've learned also that like if you get treated, say in a different medical region, say Vancouver Island, as opposed to Fraser Health, like their information isn't necessarily passed between each other. So that's obviously very specific, just talking about this region. But yeah, I mean, I think, and part of it is we need to speak up. We need to ask for better. We need to be in those boardrooms where those decisions are being made. We need more women in places of leadership because they understand. We're half the population, like you said, Carly. We are the other half. Yeah.
They're like, there's not a market for this. What? 50% of the population?
Yeah. And sorry, who was at that table saying that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a reason 2%. So the data shows women-led organizations, like in the tech world, have higher performance. But last year it got even worse, and only 2% of VC dollars went to women-led businesses.
2%.
2%.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, but it's that advocating, and it's like also helping, because a lot of women did receive funding, but did they receive what they would have if they were a man at the table?
Yeah, and who was on their board?
Yeah.
And which decisions were they led a certain way, or because of those dollars that were invested?
Yeah.
So many questions.
Yeah, but it's an opportunity. Like I think, and we're seeing such a positive shift with a lot more women in different industries in leadership positions.
Yeah,
so
and
it's a start.
And I think we also have to look at things in perspective sometimes. And it's like when you zoom out, you're like, okay, yes, we have it great here in North America, in Canada. There's in other countries, you're literally dealing with life and death situations just because you are a woman.
Yeah.
So, granted, we have it good. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. Should everyone have the same freedoms that we do? Absolutely. So, I mean, it's a global question, really. But I I think that when we as individuals become stronger in our own community, then we strengthen those other voices as well.
I know that we were talking earlier about even the voice as a female and like the choices we make in relationship and like how that's viewed and how we're viewed, like single versus married versus, like something else. Maybe you can talk a bit about like how that has impacted.
Yeah, it's when I told you at the very beginning, I'm married to the love of my life, and that is, I'm so lucky, but that's not my first marriage. I was married before and I got divorced, and wow, I said it. And the thing is that I never, like everyone around me, it's not something I hide.
Right.
I openly talk about it, but I just find that sometimes there's a reaction from people when you tell them, oh, I was actually married before. Really? I didn't know. And it's like, it's as if I told them someone had died, and so I just feel that divorce sometimes is viewed so negatively. And I can understand that it can have some negative implications, especially if there are children involved.
Right.
In my case, there were not. I was quite young when I got married and quite young when I got divorced. And it just wasn't the right relationship for me. And there were a lot of reasons why I exited that relationship. But I have to say that it was the best decision I've ever made in my life.
Amazing.
And when I say I got divorced, I say it proudly.
Great.
And
so
I
like
hope
changing the narrative, right?
changing
like
the narrative. And I think that we don't have to be ashamed of that. I think, and I'm not trying to put down my ex in any way. I think that it was the best decision for both of us. I think we both got to have fuller lives with different partners.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it's okay to admit that, hey, this isn't working out. Maybe this was, I don't want to say mistake, because I do believe I had to go through that process just as my own life experience, and to learn also what I wanted in a partner, what I wanted my life to look like, what were my priorities. I met my ex when I was very young. I was 19. Wow. And I didn't know who I was then. I was growing in the relationship, and sometimes you end up growing apart. And sometimes you realize the priorities that you had when you were 19 or 20 are not necessarily the ones that you have in your mid-20s. So it was a difficult decision. It was a really hard time in my life, but it also opened me up to transform in so many different ways. And I look at that time in my life, and I'm proud that I had the courage to do what I did.
Wow, amazing. Because I think there can be pressure in society that like married, done, stick to it till death do us part. Like that's for some reason really been, ingrained in us. But what about happiness?
Yeah.
What about connection? What about like
and
grow
growing
together?
Exactly. Like, and even my partner, like we talked early on, like as long as we're growing in the same path, like let's not try to force it. Like we lived in separate cities for 5 years. And
Wow.
the fact that
That's the way to do it.
yeah. Because I met him when I was 21. So yeah, but making that commitment too and being realistic.
Yeah.
Like, why would you try to force it? Like, obviously there's lots of reasons, but to be able to release that and to see that your worth is enough to keep going in a different direction, and especially if it's amicable, it's like, okay, let's make this decision. So
Such a good idea.
I think the narrative is changing, but there is still that reaction from a lot of people.
Yeah, there is. And I would say especially so just in a lot of racialized communities, or maybe just in my own experience through the South Asian community, there was a lot of stigma attached to it. And I don't understand why. I really don't. Maybe I'm very lucky in that way that my parents were fully supportive of my decision.
Good.
They understood why I was doing it, and they wanted me to move on.
Right.
I think others in the community, maybe there was a lot of whispering going on. Oh, did you know that and I just never cared about it. And thankfully my parents didn't either. But if I didn't have their support, it would have been so difficult.
Yes.
So I just want to say, we have to think about what's best for ourselves and not what people are going to say about it.
I think the cultural aspect, being from a culture also that is big into you stick with it and you don't exit and like questioning that, right? Like I actually have this philosophy that really I think marriage should be entered into with like a 7-year contract. After 7 years, then you sit down and you renegotiate. You sit down and you say, so are things still cool? Are we still happy? Is it still fun? Yeah? Okay, let's re-sign. If not, cool. Like, why don't we just step away and like the idea of conscious uncoupling. I think it's a beautiful practice where you can like step away and say, okay, we're not going to hate each other.
Yeah.
We're just going to say we're going in different directions. Like, I love what you said. If we're not going in the same direction, then like, what's the point? Make the call. Make the call. Cut.
Freedom.
Freedom.
Yeah.
And so like you did that, and that's very powerful and like, amazing that you did, because that's also an example to people. Like, live your life, choose happiness, choose what's right. Because if you stay in it just because of cultural or societal expectations, that one life, that's it, it's gone.
Exactly.
And that's tough.
Exactly. Life is too short to be unhappy.
Or embarrassed about, I shouldn't have. No. Why do you care about my life so much?
Exactly.
That you need to judge it or talk about it.
Exactly.
What are you not busy enough?
Yeah.
Do you not have anything going on?
I know. I mean, I don't understand it because I just don't think that way. Yeah. I don't like to judge people for their decisions. I think, do what's right for you, all the power to you.
Yes.
And really, none of my business.
Yeah.
It's none of my business. So, yeah, I hope that maybe someone that's going through a separation right now or is, has been through that process, I just want you to know that I know what you're going through, and I think that you're really strong and courageous for standing up for yourself.
I think that people need to hear that. Mm-hmm. And it's powerful.
Yeah, because it's a difficult process. It's almost like a death, right? It's the death of a relationship. And, but it can also be really empowering too. So it doesn't have to be such a negative thing. Yeah. And I think we should talk about it more.
Yes. I'm so glad we're talking about it now.
And those cycles of life, like we have so many cycles within our life. So honoring each of these different phases and stages and whatever those look like, and maybe celebrating them more than, having to mourn all of the endings that we have too.
Yeah.
So anything that you want to leave us with, Sonia?
There is one thing I want to say. Since this is the Women of Wonder podcast, just a message for all the women that are listening, and even people that don't identify as women who are listening. But I think that we all need to be better allies for each other. Yes. I think that we need to step away from looking at each other as competition. I think we need to look at ourselves as a sisterhood. Yeah. I just watched Barbie.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh. So good.
Yeah,
I love the message in it. Really. Gives me like shivers from head to toe, just even saying that. It was so empowering for me. And I think when you watch it, it really is I don't want to give too much away, but I guess all I want to say is that there is enough room in this world for us all to have success.
Yeah.
And, in my industry in particular, it can be very competitive between competing news anchors, and I just never have bought into that narrative. I don't like it.
Yeah.
We can both be doing the same job. We can both have success. We can both cheer each other on. We don't have to be pitted against each other. And when we are pitted against each other, who wins?
Yeah.
Not women.
No.
So think about that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think that that's a huge thing that we believe in. It's the idea that there's enough for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you shine and you sparkle, then I do too, because that energy's around me and it's uplifting, and it just creates a better dynamic, a better energy for us all to be around and live in. Mm-hmm. And also, like, I want to be inspired by what you do. Mm-hmm. We're here, we were like tell us everything about you.
Yeah, but I also want to cheer you guys on, you know, like I want to be there. Or you girls. Wow, I just said you guys.
Oh,
Caught myself.
and I didn't even notice.
Yeah, so let's change the way we speak too. But yeah, I want to be there to support, you know, all my sisters. And I just think it can be a really powerful thing. And, you know, sometimes it takes just hearing that to really maybe rethink the way that you are, maybe with your colleagues or with your own family members or even with your friends, your frenemies. So
What's that internal dialogue? Like,
Exactly.
what comes up? And
Yeah.
it's been this exercise of actually having to celebrate and support other women. And you're a prime example of that. So thank you so much for sharing your story and for being here with us today.
thanks for the invitation.
Loved it. Thanks
enjoyed
so much,
it.
Sonia. Yes, and so like let's all support each other, rise together, and like it's a win for everyone.